we're going to go to the virtual floor now. Whoever has a question for any of the panelists, Wilvina, I guess you'll manage the Q&A portion like we always do.
I'll do that.
And that's cool. And then, yeah, let's just kind of rock on with that. And whoever's got questions for the panelists, we can get them answered.
Okay, first hand up is Kiko from Gold Coast area.
Hello, family. My name is Kiko. I'm a grateful recovering addict. So I have a question about CBDM. It seems to be the topic here. I'm a little, not lost, but I'm a little, you know, still trying to catch up on exactly on what page everybody's on, but I'm kind of catching it. So my question is this. Being that CBDM is a strong topic, are we trying to change the service structure in Narcotics Anonymous? Is this the whole point of this discussion? Was for us to, I guess, fertilize the idea of CBDM so that it can then help change over from Robert's rules to CBDM?
I'll jump in for that. No, this doesn't have any impact on the structure itself. It just has an impact on how decisions are made within the service structure itself.
No, but I mean, are we trying to influence, you know what I'm saying, with this, that maybe because CBDM seems to be better than Robert's rules and work a little bit better, including everybody's views and viewpoints, are we trying to, is that the whole point of the discussion here, is so that we can kind of like share this information so that maybe people will start to jump on board?
Well, I was invited here by Mike and Wilvina, and you know, I was just asked to share what we've experienced. I mean, you know, one thing I should tell you is, while the Chicagoland region does it, the areas don't. I mean, my home group does it. You know what I mean? And so it just depends on what you want, and you know, and.
Do you think the reason is because it works better for the area level and Robert's Rules of Order work a little bit better for the home group level?
You know, I don't really know on that, and it's not true. My home group does take votes. I just misspoke. Okay. You know, I let someone else defer to that, but you know, it really just depends on where you want to go. The other thing is, Chicagoland region meets monthly, and so I mean, this definitely has helped us streamline a little bit of the pointless discussion. I mean, we meet often. Anyway.
Well, thank you to each and every one of you guys for like coming on here and being of service and like explaining all this stuff. Like, I did get a lot out of this.
When you said it's better at one level or another, or a lot of the questions, like Lewis said, CBDM is a decision process. It's no different than if someone comes into and as far as allowing it to be a tool for others to use, it's no different than if all your recovery, you've only worked steps a certain way, and someone comes in and shares their experience, strength, and hope in a meeting of, I worked the steps with my sponsor brought me through this over here, and this is what it's done in my life, and it's working for me this way, and these are the results I've gotten. That's what we have here, are the experience, strength, and hope of people that have used CBDM and how it has improved our service lives, I guess you could say, and on the different levels. The Northeast Zonal Forum run CBDM has been doing CBDM since longer than I've been there. We now use the same process as the World Service Conference, and in my opinion, it's been running great. My home area adopted CBDM, the same process as the World Service Conference and NEZF, to get away from a failed attempt at doing it and to get away from Robert's Rules, because everything was just so oppositional. And ever since we've gone to this particular process, it's been very successful. Groups feel more heard and feel like they're able to come back, ask questions, and not have to make a decision right there, not have to oppose or be for something just because, but actually participate with their voice more than a yes or no. Like, there's less, with CBDM, there seems to be less of a focus on yes or no and more of a focus on a voice. So it is a tool that if someone wants to use it, they can. If they don't, it's up to each particular service body group. If they find CBDM works better for them, great. If not, great. We're just here to help explain and make the tools available.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Yeah, I'm going to call on the next person, but before I do that, I also wanted to mention that in Robert's rules, it's like two gladiators that are fighting, and in area service or group service, part of the antagonism that happens is really not what our spiritual principles are.
Right.
We talk about Robert's rules we talk about the spirit of Robert's rules, and instead of the spirit, we go right to the aggression of it. It's very sports-like, it's win or lose. So this tool really has little to do with the fact that another service body or world service is using it or convincing anyone to do that. It's a way to really go with a group conscience, which is our spiritual solution. So I'll end with that, and I'll go to the next person, who is Danny T. from Long Island City.
Hi, family. My name's Danny. I'm Madden. First, I'm going to start with thanking everybody on that panel, because I had no clue on what this was when I started out. I heard it, I had some common sense, a little bit about it, but the way it was presented, I want to thank everybody, because it definitely opened my eyes to it. My only question is, because we've been using Robert rules for a while. You got bodies, whether it's area groups, that's just been doing that. And I wanted to see if someone could tell me what that process is from going from having business meeting where we use Robert rules of order, and how would you go about convincing the group that this is a better way? With someone like myself or whoever that's been attending this thing would have to present it to the group to sell it, or is there a way that the area or whoever, right now I don't know who I would call upon to help float this idea on my group level, or even the area for that matter at this time. So my question would be that.
I'd like to comment on that, because I'm Lewis, I'm an addict again. I moved to Chicago in '03, and prior to I moving here, we had a couple of guys from Wisconsin come down to Region named Mark H. and John H. Many of you know those people, and they convinced Region to switch into Cbdm, and it took Region 2 years to come up with a policy. Not the right way to do it. I was actually one of the people who wrote that policy. So yeah, we transitioned just as if it was a mess, and I would not recommend that process. Although we ended up with something beautiful, it could have been better planned.
I can kind of answer that a little bit. I was the chair in the Finger Lakes area when we first switched to Cbdm, not the process that we're currently using, but as with Robert's rules, like I said, the motion and the specificity of the motion is very important. I was taught early on that, you vote on the motion itself, not the intent. So I remember the activities chair handed in a motion that was an idea, not a good motion. And I held them like, guys, if I have to rule on this, I have to rule this out of order, because as a motion, it cannot go forward. But there's this thing called consensus-based decision-making. I can walk you through how this can be treated as a proposal, step by step. And then we went through it as a body and fleshed out that idea into something that the motion maker, proposal maker, was happier with than what he first wrote. And it was something we all worked on together. I'm like, now if we want to keep doing this, if you liked how that worked, then we can put together a work group to figure out how to integrate this into our policy, and then bring that back to you and start doing that. And that was the way that we initially transitioned to Cbdm. Unfortunately, we ran into strong personalities a year later that had the right way of doing Cbdm and turned it into a train wreck. But our initial transition to Cbdm was actually quite nice. And then we recovered from that train wreck of the strong personality with the 2018 Cbdm process. People loved that. Again, it was one of those, a working demonstration of here's how we work through it. Do you like this? Does this feel more like a group conscience? Take it back to your home groups and discuss it, bring it back. And we've been on it since and working great.
Yeah, I'd like to say also that Lewis mentioned something. I think little bites of it. And Wilvina, you put something in the chat if you have a skilled facilitator that can come in and you have a group that is willing to try it, just like Dennis was talking about, if you have a group that's willing to try it, let's just try it on this issue, or let's try bite-sized pieces, like how about for things that never have any objections, we start treating them in a consensus way. Like if there's no objection, since there are no changes to the minutes, if there's no objection, let's accept them into the minutes as read. And those little kinds of things that start giving little pieces to the body of seeing how things can start working. I think I love that story, Dennis, of how it was seamless, that in the moment you had someone who was had the ability to facilitate that kind of discussion. Then, but if you don't have somebody, don't try it. Because if it crashes and burns, you'll be on the 2-year plan like Chicagoland went through.
Okay, next up is Wayne Yu.
Hi, my name's Wade. I'm an addict. I'm in the Oahu area here. Thank you, Danny, for asking that question, because that was precisely my question. So I think a follow-up. Oh, and thank you to everyone who put this together. I know that it took some heavy lifting, and if your goal was to spark a fire, you sure have. So thank you, thank you. So follow-up question to Danny's. You know, instead of having, I'm looking at our area's policies and guidelines, and they seem very deeply rooted in Robert's Rules of Orders. Is there any way that we could use another area's policies and guidelines, Louis, you know, as just a resource to look at to better incorporate what you've already done instead of having to rewrite the book?
Yes, our policy is available on ChicagoNA.org. So
Awesome.
I'll put that in the chat. ChicagoNA.org is our website, and you can look at our policy. We've had some website redesigns, so I hope it's there. I'll put my email there if there's a problem.
Are we able to copy and paste the chat? Yes, we are. Okay, thank you.
All right, great question, Wade. Next up is Steve F.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Steve. I'm an addict. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we're coming in perfect from the UK.
Sorry, I've got to be quiet. I'm in a house full of sleeping people at like 3:30 in the morning.
I get it.
Thank you so much for this meeting. It has absolutely, like Wade said, sparked a fire. I mean, I'm a little bit over the top with studying stuff, and feel a little bit depressed at how much time I've been putting into studying Robert's Rules now, but never mind, it's all one big learning curve. So my question is, well, has already been asked, and then Wade kind of asked a follow-up that helps with that. So Dennis, my question would be to yourself, with you having experience in this, what problems were there that in hindsight you'd have liked to have had a heads up, like, oh, actually, if I could go back, I wouldn't mind knowing this might have made the process easier during the transition of going from Robert's Rules to Cbdm, you know, in the group setting?
At the area setting, actually, my hindsight was I stepped aside too easily when the strong personality came in. I was chair. The vice chair wasn't really paying attention very much to our transition. The area was loving the Cbdm as it came on board, but then we had, as we all experienced strong personalities, he knew the right way of doing Cbdm and we were doing it wrong. And people were starting to listen to him, and the vice chair started listening to him, and I just stepped aside because I got tired of some of the fighting I was getting off to the side. So that was really my mistake of not standing up more for the principles that we started embarking on. But I also felt at the time that pushing too hard was actually going to push us away from it. And then the area had to go through its own bottom of experiencing how much of a train wreck that whole system was, which allowed us to move into the Cbdm we now experience. So our initial Cbdm transition was great, but it was moving from someone who knew Cbdm and how to facilitate it to someone that didn't pay attention and was getting their cues from someone who thought they knew how to. So it was a lack of facilitation that turned it into a train wreck for about a year and a half to 2 years. So in hindsight, I kind of wish I'd stood up more for it, but had I stood up more for it then, would we be where we're at now with it? So I don't know.
All right, cool. Is there any other literature on CBDM anywhere that I can go to other than the link that was already in the chat earlier?
NA.org CBDM Basics is awesome. And other than that, the fine people here all have experience with that. And then there's different guidelines to see how it's being facilitated in different areas, different regions, different zones. NEZF and Finger Lakes area both pretty much have a cookie cutter of what's in the Guide to World Services with very little change.
There's also a facilitator's guide at NA.org. So that's very important as well. If you are in a leadership position in any level of service, it would be really good to take a look at that. So yes, the link is in the chat, and that's an excellent document. And then when I looked on the website, the locally developed resources are rather old. So I really think that this CBDM Basics is the most up-to-date guide that you'll find, and it's very thorough. I think you'll learn a lot from it.
Cool, brilliant, thank you very much.
Okay, next up is Kenny from Western Queens.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kenny, and I'm from Queens, New York, as Wolverina just said. And this, just to give a little bit of history with our area, it was presented to us from World Service about 7 to 10 years ago as part of a change in our service structure. It was an SSP, Service System Proposal, and in it was CBDM. Now, we had people from World do some workshops and explain SSP and some of the CBDM. I could not grasp it then, and even though you folks did a good job of elucidating it, I still have a very hard time grasping. I can't see implementing this. I can't see how, because you can't really learn unless you have practicality. If you don't see logistics in action, you can't. And I'm trying to be open-minded because I have sometimes what's going on. Basically, I'm older now. I'm 67 years old, and I don't particularly. I never did like change. And this is change. And what I wanted to, here's a question for you guys. And that is, does this cut down on any of the time consumption that's involved with Robert's Rules of Order? Does it do that? Does it cut down on the personalities ricocheting all over the area service walls? Does it do that? Is it more lengthy? Is it more short? I mean, and it looks like you could make a motion or whatever, and it could be at different points of discussion. It could be tailored and retailored and redesigned and amended. So, I'm not used to seeing something like that. In Robert Rules of Order, it's very hard to amend a motion, So I don't know where to go with this. I'm just, as a generally speaking in my area, it would be met with contempt before
Lewis
even
is chomping at the bit.
Yeah, I'll speak on that. Yeah, CBDM was part of the SSP, but this has nothing to do with that. I mean, so this is and I know that there is some skepticism in some communities of CBDM at the World Service Conference. And my question to those people is, have you ever been part of a service body that used it? And having been involved in one for a long time, just the affect is so much better. Some decisions take a little while longer, a really hard decision, but they're usually better. And what this process does is it doesn't tame the personalities. It brings out the best they have to offer. And so all those crazy people, buried down in that craziness are good ideas. And a good facilitator will be able to bring those ideas out so that those, and once those people have their ideas listened to for the first time ever, in some cases, they become a lot more engaged. And so it's a process that really creates a whole different affect. You know, I'm good at it, I'll admit it. And one man said to me, how do you stand that person? Because that person always asks questions and this, that, and the other. And I said, well, that person always asks questions that need to be answered. And that person brings these strengths that we need. And I'm willing to accept, you know, this particular person's issues so that we can draw on those strengths. And it does take careful facilitation, it does. And I'm a trained facilitator, so I know how to do it. But yeah, it does. But once you get through it, you know, you're able to re-engage people who feel that they haven't been engaged. And the decisions are always better. Many of them are a lot faster. Why do you need to get a motion in second in the minute?
Yeah,
You know?
I wanted to jump in for a second just because I'm familiar with the service body, and I actually use CBMD in my zonal subcommittee. Here's where the time factor is addressed, Kenny. By the time people follow all the rules of what's going on, the rules take 3 times as long to enact as opposed to just quickly, without interruption, having the idea, taking questions, and people do use a timer. I know when I chair my subcommittee meeting, I use a timer for the different segments that we're doing. And once we've gone around and we get the go around on the idea, and then we decide to move forward with that, it's like all of the rule taking actually makes 3 times as long. And then the personalities that are rigidly clinging to obeying these rules and guidelines, that portion of it is what makes it frustrating for many people. So we do have another hand. I don't know if that answered your question at all, but if you have a facilitator that comes in, someone from the outside that maybe could come in to just show people how that would work or observe it in another service body. So we do have a hand. I have Sheba.
Hey, thanks everyone for having this info session. It's really good. Thank you for the invite, Wovina. Thank you. Thank you all for participating. So I have some experience on a group level with consensus-based decision-making. And for the most part, I coming into the service body, you know, being conditioned to do service on a group level, it was really pleasant atmosphere, very attractive on a group level. But I'm going to ask the question in a minute. My experience with area and region, I have none with group consensus-based decision-making. I'm wondering if that will encourage that, you know, more of a mob mentality when it comes to area and region. I say that because I've seen members in those positions at area and region. I've seen the chairs not be refreshed by different members coming in doing service from the group level. But anyway, my question is, what type of person would you recommend to the group? What type of recovering addict? What type of resume would you be looking for as far as someone who would be facilitating a meeting that has consensus-based decision-making, has a consensus-based decision-making structure? What are we looking for? What can you tell a newcomer? What can you tell the groups? This is the qualifications that we need for this recovering addict. Can you give me a heads up for that? Thanks.
Yes, I do. And in this CBDM basics, it does speak directly to that. It speaks that a facilitator that needs to have a familiarity with the service body. They need to understand kind of the personality of the service body, and they have to have that experience with CBDM, a real understanding of the process so that they can own the process so that the group can do its discussions in a way that is like focused, and that they can keep them focused on that. They need to be very prepared. They need to understand the issues that are coming in front of the body, and they need to be prepared to and sort of like agile in their ideas about how, like Lewis was talking about, oh, he just said that. Now, doesn't that go towards one of those snags this group had with this idea? Would anyone like to expound on that and see how that might be able to be implemented? And you really have to be agile in that way to help move the group forward through the weeds to come out with something useful. They need to be really committed to that CBDM process in a way that they can focus the group to use it, and they really need to maintain and get and maintain the trust of the body. To do that, they need to be flexible and patient and understanding, and that they're willing to take the time. And like Lewis was talking about, that they are working with the principles of CBDM, not the personalities of the people in the room. However, it's important also to be able to handle those difficult personalities that, and there are some techniques, I'm a trained facilitator as well, where you can take what someone's saying and you put it over in the parking lot so that they, you write it down and they know they were heard. Well, we're not going to deal with that now, but we're going to put it over here and we'll come back around to it, so you can keep the focus of the group. So it takes someone who's skilled in a leadership capacity and that is trustworthy and can really hold the group. I found at the World Service Conference that my voice tended to be very calming and steady, and then every once in a while I had to bring out the mom voice. And that was very, very effective. Now, it's not effective if you use it all the time, but you need to have someone who has some command of the group when needed. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, Laura's absolutely right on that. One thing I'd like to add is it really helps to find someone who doesn't jump to conclusions quickly, someone who listens, is willing to listen, and generally people who are first up with the idea and the position, they tend to be hard to be good facilitators, but you never know. Ultimately, open-mindedness is the most important thing, and being willing to listen, in my opinion.
So someone who falls in line with the fourth concept.
Yes.
Would you
Okay,
not
Sheba,
think
is
that
your
would
hand
be,
up? Go ahead.
I just want to, that's a lot for one person.
Yes, especially in this community.
The sky would be parting and they would be dropping down.
Don't forget walking on water either.
So yeah, the guidelines for the group as far as selecting that individual to facilitate or, to run the meeting within as close to that structure as possible. I'd like to see something, like a demonstration or someone showing up. I heard you guys speaking about that, a pamphlet with some bullet points. That would be awesome. Does the transition have to be exact to consensus-based decision-making, or could it be a hybrid of Robert's rules? So I guess groups would have to choose, because some are sicker than others, and that applies to a group level as well. Yeah. So not only
Tommy, I know that you never operated with Robert's rules, but interestingly enough, you used the amendment word, which is from Robert's rules. So, can you speak to what Sheba was saying about just, because here's the piece, you were new. You said in the beginning you were new, you dropped in, and then you started doing it. So from
Yeah.
that point, can you help us out?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like when I use the word amendment, it's almost like an evolution of the idea that was originally stated. You know, because you know, sometimes when somebody makes an idea in the group, you know, some people don't understand it, or some people might have a better understanding of the actual idea that was made, and they'll come up with, like, say, here's a good example. You know, somebody might say, you know, how do we, you know, get the newcomers more involved in the meeting? And then somebody, you know, will come out and say, well, let's have them introduce their clean time, you know, and then all of a sudden somebody else, you know, then they'll say, okay, so, you know, the idea is to somehow fit into the meeting how to get, you know, some the newcomers to announce their clean time. And then somebody with some experience might say, well, you know, maybe the best part is to do it right after clean time. And then somebody else, you know, will want to change it. You know, they're all like a little amendments to the original idea to make it grow. You know, it's almost like an evolution of the original thing. And I say amendments is so I can say to the people, does anybody have any ideas to add on to the original idea to maybe make it better than what it was? You know, it's not necessarily to change the whole idea, because that's not what we're looking to do. We're looking at, you know, like everybody says, you know, have everybody chime in on it. You know, does anybody have a better way of creating the original idea into something that might be better for the group? Because if we just make it just that original idea and only that original idea, a lot could be missed. You know, and you know, and also, you know, the newcomers also don't really understand what's going on. So when you have that kind of evolution of the idea, they kind of catch on pretty quickly, and then they start chiming in on what that might benefit them. And next thing you know, it became, you know, we didn't do specific introductions, but we asked the newcomers with 90 days or less, right after clean time, does anybody with 90 days or less wish to announce their name and their clean time? And it was a beautiful thing for my home group, because it became a beginners meeting, and it got people to be known. It got them to raise their hands for the first time, you know. So, and it all came from somebody who said, well, this is a beginners meeting. How do we show the newcomer that it's welcome? And it was a beautiful thing, you know. And you know, and being that I had no idea that amendments were even used in Robert's rules. It was just something I was taught at the group level, you know, on what might, you know, on a word that could bring out the, you know, the ideas in other people's heads to come out onto the floor, not necessarily to just question the original idea, you know, and maybe possibly they're not using their creative thoughts, you know, and you know, and that was just a way to do it that I was taught. And it really gets the ball rolling on people to, you know, come up with better ideas for the group.
Okay, so I've just been informed that we're going to take one more question before we wrap up and close. If there are anyone that hasn't spoken, or someone that, you know, wants to chime in. I know we have a couple of trusted servants from areas. We've got Andy Z, who's a former chairperson of Western Queens. We have Danny Z, also, you know, GSR, Tom Jones, any of the other people, Sue, Kathy. Any other questions about this process? Jack, Steve, if you want to weigh in anything.
Yeah, I'll say something.
Okay.
You know, I don't really think, as addicts are very resistant to change, that's one thing, but it's not really such a big jump. For example, at my home group, you know, I'm pretty sure most of the members at this point in time, before the meetings closed, we were in effect using consensus-based decision-making. In effect, not officially, and it actually went smoother. A few years ago, we were trying to stick very rigidly to the Roberts rules, and I remember a lot of mental energy being spent and time being spent trying to adhere to Robert's rules, and it did definitely seem to take longer. The last few months before our last meeting in March, we used sort of unofficial consensus-based decision-making without even calling it that, and it worked better. And I don't know if anyone here could answer the question if they're in like an area that uses consensus-based decision-making. Did it start first in the groups, or did it start first at a service committee and then spread downward to the groups? That's whoever wants to answer that question. I'm just curious. I was just wondering about that while I'm here.
We had it both ways. I think in some regards, if it starts at a home group, it opens up the ability for group service representatives to be more active participants in consensus decision making when it comes to the area, because
right.
They're not just sending a vote, they're sending a full discussion, an understanding of the evolution of something. So when, like in our area, they send something back to groups to vote on it, right? So if they're coming back with a solid vote, there's no room to participate in consensus building. So it has to evolve, kind of evolve together so that there's an understanding of this group conscience and how it comes alive in the decision-making process.
You know, I love seeing members from different parts of the country and different parts of the world participating in these workshops. I have to say, though, that, you know, my heart is in Western Queens. I'm the regional committee member for Western Queens. And when I hear of these ideas being, you know, circulated throughout the fellowship, and I think it's a good idea, that's when that's the purpose of these workshops, is to bring ideas, you know, center stage so they can be discussed, you know, and addressed. And if found beneficial, like, you know, we can make a move on it. The one thing that I've really, and Laura was kind of just touching on this at the end, you know, to have like a true discussion, like to have a consensus on something, you know, it requires numbers to turn into actual, you know, thoughts and discussion, rather than just specific votes and bringing a block of votes to the table and moving that up the line, like a thorough discussion on things, I think is really how we accomplish things, you know, as a fellowship, you know, in general. Like when I have a discussion with my friends, and this is really the way that I try to think of this process, when I talk to my friends about making plans to do something or coming to a specific idea, you know, to a conclusion, like, you know, generally, like, I don't argue with my friends. You know, I don't say, all right, well, give me a pro and give me a con. Like, you know, I mean, we have a discussion, and there might be some pros and cons involved in that discussion, and that's cool. But the thing is, it's just like, I think it's like after I eat, I got to loosen my belt buckle up a little bit so I'm not busting out. I feel like it just loosens the belt buckle of, you know, the environment, and kind of lets us sit back and make decisions in a very loving way, and keeping in the spirit of unity. It's not meant to turn things upside down and make significant changes that everybody is uncomfortable with. We can ease into making decisions. And look, there's some good parts to Robert Rules also. I mean, there is organization. Like, there's no reason why you can't mix the two of them together. But it's certainly, I think, and this is just my opinion, you know, for what it's worth, it just enforces a very loving environment and a very caring process. And we work together on something. And if we can't come to an agreement on it, then, you know, maybe it's not something worth addressing. But if we can, you know, I think that decision is much more effective. I want to thank everybody for coming, all the panelists. I mean, you guys dealt with my last minute antics. TJ dealt with me in the tunnel on the train, Laura last minute. Dennis is he doesn't even know it, but he's like my new go-to guy, you know, for many different things. I think this is your second workshop with me. And Louis, your energy, man, it's unparalleled. I mean, I want to be there with you, you know? So you make me want to be there with you and take on the world, man, you know? So, Wilvina, as always, thank you for helping me, you know, make this possible. And everybody, I mean, I appreciate you guys coming in and taking the time to listen to some different ideas.
I just wanted to also say one last quick thing. You know, in Narcotics Anonymous, when we have circumstances at our service bodies where we are so tightly adhering to rules and guidelines and policy, you know, and we fail to carry the message. When we have service bodies that like gear up in the polarized camps and then are not able to fill positions, or they're not able to make decisions because they're so angry about a specific rule, it would seem to me that the benefit of consensus-based decision-making, the way we described it, is that people can take a look perhaps at a guideline, a policy that has been around for a long time. And I'll just end with this. It says in the what is the NA program? We can examine and re-examine old ideas and replace them with new ones. So with that, thank you for letting me share.
Right. No, that's right. You know, creating that environment. You know, there's a bakery down the road from me, and I think how they get their customers in there is, you know, you could smell the pies being baked. You know, I mean, that's what draws people in, like, you know, knowing that there's something good on the inside. If it smelled like dog poop, nobody's going to come in. But the smell of that apple pie, like, it draws me right in. And I know that there's love in there. Listen, with that, I'd like to thank you guys again. And